I was too young to know it at the time, but my life changed forever on June 28th, 1992. That was the day my mum, Tina, was murdered. No one has ever been convicted for her killing. I think the pain of that led my family to put everything in a box and concentrate on giving me the best life they could. 32 years later, my mum has mostly been forgotten. But I've been searching for answers. The police have agreed to look at her case again. But what hope is there that my mum will get justice?
Okay, if you can turn your face a little bit towards the light there. It's perfect, thank you. A lot of the work that I've been doing with photography, the people I work with, we get them to act out something that they've been through in their lives and get them to show it in facial expressions. And using things like this creates a mask they can hide behind.
Do you think people find it easier to have something in front of them?
I think they do, because it can be quite off-putting, particularly when you're working with someone you've never met before, to show such a vulnerable side to yourself. Do you want to tell me your story?
So, when I was 1 year old, my mum was killed, and my dad went on trial for it. Her murder case went unsolved, and I guess there was no justice for her. I think I've just always had questions, really, about my parents. There's so much that I want to find out.
How old was she when she was killed?
32.
So very young then.
And so I'm 33 now, so I'm kind of living the days that she never got to.
Right. I mean, it's a brave journey. It takes a lot of courage to
Thank you.
find these things out and put yourself...
No, thanks. It does scare me when people say brave, because I'm like, should I be more worried? So basically they said that they are gathering everything that they can.
Wow, that's positive, isn't it? So you were so doubtful, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, they made it very clear that this is like a small step of what could be a really long process.
But it's a step forward.
But it's a step forward.
Yeah.
But they basically are wanting to gather everything they can to then put forward for investigation.
Right, so their papers, court papers, exhibits, forensics?
Yeah.
They said all that?
Yeah, they literally said all of that.
Okay.
There is a review team in the Metropolitan Police, and that's their sole job. They review current cases at periodic times to see if there's any opportunities that may have been overlooked or missed. Now that Daniel has brought it to attention and asked those questions as the next of kin wanting to know answers, it will certainly be looked at again. The police don't want murderers out on the street.
So did they give you a name for the investigating officer yet? Or?
No, I don't even think it's that far. Would it be that far?
No, I think they're gathering all the information papers together and see what they got. But that's really positive.
When I started this process, it was really so my mum wasn't forgotten. I never thought that justice for her was an option. Now the police are actually looking into my mum's case, it's kind of left me with more questions, and wondering why and what happened the first time round.
So I was a detective constable at Golders Green Police Station, which covers this area. It was a Sunday, and the call came in. Uniformed police attended, first of all. It was daylight. I didn't actually see your mother at the scene.
Okay.
Your mother had been taken away when I arrived.
Can you explain a bit more about what would have happened to her body after it was taken to the coroner?
Generally speaking, with suspicious deaths, the body's held by the coroner until he's satisfied that cause of death has been established. She'd been stabbed. But I'm aware that that wasn't the primary cause of death, it was asphyxia. So
Can you explain that to me?
Strangulation.
Okay.
I don't know whether that was manual strangulation or whether there was a cord with a key around her neck.
Okay.
She'd been given the key to the ward and it was put on a piece of jute string.
Strangulation is an absolute brutal act where the woman has to view her perpetrator killing her. For Tina's death, we see evidence of overkill after the fatal strangulation.
We now know that Tina was stabbed multiple times, that the tip of the blade was left in her body.
The term overkill is to kill, which is in excess. So, for example, if a woman is stabbed 20 times, it doesn't take 20 times to kill that woman. So now it's entering a more of an aggravating, sadistic form of death.
I mean, it wasn't a passing robbery or, I mean, the victims wouldn't have a lot of money on them. I don't think we ever thought it was anything other than a personal attack on Tina Wing.
So the suspect from the case was my father.
That's true.
Did you ever meet him?
Yes, I met him. Don't recall having any conversation with him, but yeah, I met him. He was known to police and has been quite violent, I think. I know that because when we went to the house, he was ultimately arrested by the officers in the Special Patrol Group who equipped with protective equipment, and all they would do was arrest him and hand him over to the investigating team.
Did you agree with that decision?
No. I thought it was a shame that we lost any possible comment from him. Even if they innocently say to you, I've been expecting you, there's an element of, it's not an admission, but at a later stage you could say, well, why were you expecting the police? It's impossible to have any rapport with him. He just looks upon us as the police that threw him on the ground and put handcuffs on him, and it was a shame.
A year after my mum's body was found, my dad stood in the dock at the Old Bailey, accused of her murder. June 1993, Barnet Borough Times. An obsessively possessive boyfriend brutally knifed a young mother to death when she tried to build a life without him, a court heard this week.
Were you confident at the beginning of the trial that Alan would be convicted?
100%.
The jury heard the day she died was to be her first time out in the grounds without an escort. The nurse in charge told her this in the presence of her boyfriend. Alan was arrested the following day and denied knowing Miss Swing was going for an unsupervised walk.
About a month before she was murdered, she had said, "I've finished it with Alan." Tina told the hospital, I was there, that she didn't want him to come in anymore. They were over.
The police found a newsagent who gave him a lift to the hospital that day.
He clearly stated that he had taken Alan there.
Later, a flower seller saw a man matching his description walking past with blood on his hands, the court heard.
They called the flower girl, who very bravely, in spite of her own misgivings and concerns about herself, gave evidence but behind a screen.
When arrested, Heath was found to have 2 nasty cuts on his fingers and scratches on his neck. Forensic tests on Miss Wing showed her dress had splatters of mixed blood, her own and her attackers. Alan is among the one of 6 in the population the blood could have come from.
In our head, we had heard it all and was like, right, they've proved it, and that's it. It's a done deal, it'll be guilty.
It feels kind of surreal to be here. I think I can almost visualise my family walking here and just like through the trauma, like how stressful and upsetting that must have been.
The jury walked in. It was all like slow motion as this was happening. And then the judge asked if they had a verdict, and they said not guilty. And everybody just gasped, everybody.
Judges will direct a jury that in order to convict a defendant in a murder trial or in any criminal trial, they have to be sure. That means that if a jury think that the defendant is potentially guilty, they must find him not guilty. If they think he's more likely than not to be guilty, they must find him not guilty. Even if they think he is probably guilty, they must find him not guilty. The law requires the jury to be sure, and nothing less than sure will do.
Kind of breaks my heart a little bit to think how much distress they would have been in. And like nothing, just no closure. When he was not guilty, do you remember that moment?
Yeah.
Was that a shock?
No.
Okay.
I never thought it was that strong a case.
Well, why do you think the case wasn't strong?
We didn't have the evidence we would have liked. I remember having a conversation with the detective superintendent that I wasn't confident.
Lawrence Kirshen, QC, defending, said in his closing speech that there was not a shred of evidence to support the prosecution allegation that Alan murdered Tina after an argument. Mr. Kirshen added, "There is nothing more dangerous than circumstantial evidence when the police have decided plainly who, in their opinion, committed the crime."
I think it was the best case that we could have done. I think it was a thorough investigation, but I was never happy that we'd get a conviction. It just was a lot of circumstantial evidence.
A central part of any criminal trial is 2 different barristers, sometimes 2 different teams of barristers, looking at the same piece of evidence, the same fact potentially, and inviting the jury to draw 2 different conclusions from it.
It's not gladiatorial in the sense of it, but they will hang on certain words or they will attack certain witnesses.
Most things are open to interpretation in some way or other, and there's certainly an element of theatre, of performance, of analysis, of storytelling in inviting a jury to reach one conclusion or another.
I remember the woman in the flower store. I remember where she was. I think I took a statement from her.
Yes.
And she was extremely nervous.
She was.
But we weren't able to emphatically say it was the suspect. She described, she didn't know him by name.
No.
She'd served a man who fitted the description, but of course he wasn't the only man of that description in the area.
And the only other thing is, the man that owned the corner shop near where he lived.
He's the chap that gave him a lift, is it?
He did.
Yes.
But he just wasn't believed, was he, by the court?
I think he'd taken him there more than once.
He had, yeah.
I don't know why he took Alan to the hospital.
Just a kind man.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that far, was it?
No.
But even if they believed him, it wasn't sufficient to convict him.
Mr. Kirshen said the case against the defendant effectively stood or fell on the reliability of the evidence of the shopkeeper, whose brother had said he thought the lift had been Saturday, the day before the murder.
When the verdict was announced, all my family went off for a coffee shop or a pub near. I went round to the front of the Old Bailey, where his dad and his brother were. I approached the dad and just said to him, I don't want to talk about the verdict. I just want to talk about Daniel. Did you know that Alan is trying to get custody of him? And his dad said, no, he can't do that. He's not well. The only way you could see him is if I came round to your house and you held the baby up at the window and he could wave to him. And I said, well, if we're on the same page, please can you try and stop the process? And we never heard another thing, so I'm assuming the dad did step in.
I was raised in Tottenham by my nan and granddad. My nan was 60 when my mum was murdered. She became a mum again, and I don't know how she did it. Nan was always just superwoman to me.
Daniel. Hello, Dan. Hello, Dan. Oh,
look. Someone asked me, like, where my parents were, and I was like, my mum's passed and I don't know what's happened to my dad. And she just, like, laughed at me and she was like, oh, you're an orphan like Oliver Twist. And it was things like that were kind of just like, oh, am I weird?
She always used to say one thing, all the worrying in the world won't change anything. You've got to keep going, you've got to keep laughing, and she did.
This is the way we eat our breakfast on a cold.
Daniel was the youngest, and he literally was the golden child. He had blonde, curly hair, and everyone just loved him. He was adorable.
Loss from a young age, if you remember it or not, it has an effect. It's attachment issues. I was so scared of losing her because she was my everything. Nan would take me to the cinema and I'd sit there. I could just see the screen kind of reflecting from her eyes and her glasses, and I just used to sit there staring at her. And she just used to be like, watch the film, and I just used to stare, and I used to know in my head that this wasn't going to be forever.
Everybody support him, even the kids. Let him do whatever he wanted. If he wanted to play with the toy, just give it to him. And my mum would never talk about it, nor with my dad. And he would ask questions about, like, where's my mum? Where's my dad?
I don't know much about my dad. What I do know is he comes from a black heritage background. Apart from that, I have no information. I wonder if you could kind of tell me about what you remember of their relationship, maybe how they met, or maybe who he was.
It's quite sketchy. I don't know how they met. I don't know. She said she met this bloke and he's getting on her nerves, keep coming round. And then the next time, she was with him.
Yeah.
Like, she was going out with him.
Oh, okay. And do you kind of remember how long that was after?
Quite quickly.
Quite quickly.
Quite quickly.
And what was your first kind of impressions of him?
So, a little while later, Tina came and said he was sent to prison because he was an electrician and someone hadn't paid for the job. So he went and removed what he'd put up and he was sent to prison. That was the story he told her.
Right, okay.
And would I go with her to Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight to visit him? That was the first time I met him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Intense.
Yeah.
And how long was he in there for?
I don't know for sure. But I think it was 5 years. He was about 6 foot, I think. Everyone's taller than me, but yeah, I think he was about 6 foot. I didn't find him intimidating. I'm going to contradict myself and say strange, but I want to go back to being just basic. No, I didn't find him intimidating. I don't remember him coming out of prison, but then he was there.
Okay.
He was just there. With hindsight, looking back on it now, I think she was having a nice time when he wasn't there.
Okay.
I don't think she wanted to be with him. Didn't have that conversation, but so she was always trying to get away from him. So there was once when she was walking down West Green Road and he wouldn't leave her alone, and she ran over the zebra crossing to get away from him and was hit by a bus. And she fractured her skull. Went to hospital.
And did you see changes in her? Was there changes in her personality?
No, she was just like,
Really?
yeah.
Like even after like fractured skulls, and she was still never felt scared or timid or shut down?
No. She didn't talk about it very much.
Do you think that, Tina would have turned her life around and been a good mum and had a successful life with Daniel?
I'd love to say yes. But I think with Alan, the way he was, I can only say stalking, like continually approaching her, phone in the house, knocking on the door. I don't think she would have had a chance, and I don't think Daniel would have had a chance to have a happy life, sadly to say. I have got photos of Daniel if you'd like to see it.
I'd love to see it.
That's him in one of his modelling poses.
Good Lord.
Doesn't he look like Tina? So most of these are when he's doing his modelling. It just really, it's hard for him to grow up without a mum and dad. He's got so many questions. And actually, it's always really, searching to understand him and how he thinks, and, why he is like he is, and why his mum never got justice.
I wish I could answer that one.
I know.
But, no, I can't.
No.
It's, I suppose it's a failure as far as the police is concerned, but I can say with the hand on my heart, it wasn't for the lack of trying.
No.
The evidence, it wasn't available. We couldn't find it.
Yes.
And we did try.
My dad was acquitted of my mum's murder in 1993. The police are looking at her case again, but what will they need to bring a prosecution?
What did the investigating officer say about suspects?
At the time, there was only one suspect, which was my dad.
The issue now is going to be, because he was acquitted at the trial, is there new evidence? Is there evidence that they can put before the Crown Prosecution Service to bring another charge? Because double jeopardy's not there now.
The general principle historically was that if you'd been tried and acquitted, you couldn't then be retried. That law changed in 2003, and it's now possible, if there is new and compelling evidence, for a case to be reopened and retried.
All the old evidence will be reintroduced, and any new evidence, which could be a witness or forensics. It could well be that new evidence can prove your dad didn't murder them. Someone else did.
Okay.
What about the knife?
Yeah. Okay, so in the court case, when a picture of the knife came up, my nan recognised the knife.
She suddenly said, I bought that set of knives for them when they moved into that flat. But we weren't shown it. And we were saying, go and tell him, Mum, go and tell him. And she was like, oh, it's too late now, we can't do anything about it.
I made inquiries with the importers of the knife. I went and saw them and they told us who they were supplying in that area. They couldn't say specifically who it was sold to. It was really a commonly purchased kitchen knife. I think they sell them in Tesco as the...
That never came out in court?
I don't believe so.
You've got to tell that to the police. As a senior investigating officer, I would want to know that. And maybe Daniel's grandmother should have been called.
No members of the family were called as a witness. And we didn't question it at the time because we just trusted the police. I remember the defence saying he was a loving boyfriend that was very attentive and loved Tina. But I don't remember there being a counter-argument to that. The nurses from the hospital were saying, he was overzealous, he was possessive, he wouldn't let her breathe. But that was all thrown out of the court because they weren't psychologists or psychiatrists. But it's exactly the same as what we saw, that, he was constantly phoning on the phone. He was constantly knocking on the door, to a stage where she just thought the only way to stop this happening was to go back to him.
If a person is giving evidence about something which isn't necessarily within their expertise, then the judge is likely to give that less weight. That said, certainly when factoring in that a prosecution has to make a jury sure, an explanation for why the defendant behaved in the way that the prosecution say they did is absolutely a compelling part of a prosecution.
You kind of put things in a box, and you have to do that to move on with your life. And then the box is opened, and not only do you remember what you remember, but you also remember what you forgot. So I think that's the difficulty with it.
Feeling a bit tired today. I think a lot going around in my head. It's like, everyone's tried so hard to move on, and I'm kind of rehashing everything and asking questions. It just kind of again brings it all back to life, that how real all of this is and how sensitive it all is, and it's just really hard, I think, and this is where I start doubting myself if I'm doing the right thing, even though this is something that I feel like I need to do.
Investigating what happened to his mum, researching all the details, I think he's kind of at sometimes at a loss with it as to how he feels and how he's dealing with it, because it's the first time he's dealt with it sober.
I'd say the last year of college is when I started to experiment with alcohol. And I really loved it. Because it gave me the confidence that I think I was looking for. And I think I really strived on that, and being able to go out and be given.
When he was drinking, he was a good time boy, and he loved to party, and everyone would gravitate to him, and he was so much fun. It was almost like escapism.
It was glasses of wine every night, and then that would turn into a bottle of wine every night. Adam would still be at work, and then I'd have one of the bottles before he'd get home, hide that in the wardrobe, and then like have the other one as if like that was the one bottle. When Nan had her stroke, I think that really kind of shook me. My alcohol issues were linked to seeing Nan deteriorate. I was losing Nan like in front of me. I remember I had this shoot and it was at 9 a.m. and I just drank like a bottle of red wine before I'd even done that shoot. Like, that was before 9 a.m. When I came out of the like binge, I had to check what date it was. I had to see that it was like 10 days had passed. I thought it was like 3 days. I was like, where have I been?
I think when the drinking kind of got in the way of him living his life, he realised he had to stop.
The last drink I had was October 2021. I think I just had enough. I decided to go gym that day, and then like I spoke to my friend on the way home from the gym, and I was like, if I go for another drink, will you just tell me not to? And I cried, and I just never went back.
So, Daniel, we've found some information about your father.
Mm-hmm.
Want to hear it?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, no idea. Of course.
He's in London.
Okay.
In North London.
Okay.
So not too far away. And he married again. And he has 2 children from this marriage.
Mm-hmm. Is he married now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's crazy. And it's definitely him?
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's real. I feel really, really disconnected from it. It doesn't really feel like we're talking about someone I came from. One thing that Nan never wanted me to do was to meet him. And I feel like the amount she sacrificed, I feel like, do I owe that to her to, you know, respect what she said, you know?
Do you know why she didn't want you to speak to him or meet him?
Because she didn't think he was a nice guy, like a nice man. I think she went through a lot. My dad still being alive, it's just mad. I mean, I don't think things have felt so clear before. This person is very much very real. This isn't just a story. This is like my life. This is my DNA. It's like we've both just got on with our own lives. It's like my mum's incident, not even incident, like murder happened. Then there's 2 completely separate lives just being like living. It feels like my world's been turned upside down. And it's like everything I knew or thought isn't the case. I feel like I had like a fortunate upbringing from the circumstances.
Yeah.
But I think also like this process has brought to life what I've lost, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that my mum didn't get an opportunity to be a mum, really. And I guess both my parents really didn't have that opportunity with me.
I think my dad was around, but he was never like there present and had much influence to me. But,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can't even remember like what my image of my dad would have been, because it was always kind of like, he's not around, do you know what I mean? So I never kind of envisioned him.
Yeah, he didn't exist.
Yeah, but
you found out he does exist.
He does exist, and so like there is the potential to, I guess, reach out.
Yeah, the thoughts in your head are like, does he want to meet me? Would he want to see me? What would he say?
I haven't really thought much about like actually what he would be thinking, because in my head it's he wouldn't, because I've not.
Why would he? Because he's not said anything.
Not been there, yeah. So it's like, but also like I don't want anything from him, and I don't think there's anything where I am right now that I would gain.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it won't happen, it just doesn't feel right for me now. You know, it's like, it's a lot of stuff to kind of work out, you know?
Yeah.
Once again, I'm reminded that after 32 years, my mum's murder is still not solved. Whoever killed her is walking free.
I'm aware that officers thought they had their man, but did he actually kill her on the day? Was it a case missed because they got it wrong? I can remember the murder of Rachel Nickel in 1992. We know what happened with the person that was accused and how he was accused and how that was thrown out.
Firstly, police became convinced quite wrongly that Colin Stagg was the killer. They used a honey trap, an undercover female officer, to try to persuade him to confess. Suspicion hung over him even after he was sensationally acquitted.
The case was unsolved, and then in 2002 an officer came to me and said that DNA's been progressed and we found a foreign sample on her underwear. And through DNA, a man that was convicted of murder and serial sexual attacks. In Tina's case, forensics move on. We could look at the clothing again and we might find traces of spittle or sweat.
The presence of DNA at a crime scene can be harder to challenge than, for example, eyewitness testimony, because it's based on scientific facts, scientific procedures.
I would hope that there's still a sample where DNA can be conducted to identify the perpetrator.
I know that there was a blood sample taken at the time that came back with 1 of 6 in the population as a potential match with my dad.
So this is a blood sample from the scene when your mum was murdered?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
The string with the key was found around her neck and it was clearly blood-stained. I bag it up and it eventually goes off to the police laboratory for analysis. Been a lot of force used on the cord. I don't think it would have been strong enough to have strangled her. But there had been leverage on it because it was blood-stained. The official belief is that it was the assailant's blood. Nobody came up as a suspect other than the person who was ultimately charged. And when he was arrested, he had a cut on the joints of his fingers. All that they could tell us was that it was a common blood group, and that was the best they could do, which didn't really help our inquiry.
Probably that blood sample couldn't have been tested back in 1992, did you say?
Yes, yeah.
DNA was only in its infancy then.
Wow.
It wasn't until 1994 that they started using the techniques that we use today.
Okay. How much compared to then would you need now?
You'd need about at least two spots of blood, two good spots of blood to get something potentially then. Today we're talking about an amount of blood that you couldn't even see. So if you imagine a pinprick, well, it would be far less than that.
God, so it's real.
So it's really, really tiny.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I did have this evidence from my mum's case, do you think you would be able to define a match?
And if they'd stored them, yes, they could still be tested today. Now, whether they've kept that, because in those days they might have destroyed it because it was considered biologically not safe to hold on to it.
feels really different looking at these photos now. I feel like I've gone through a full kind of circle moment. It's like when I look at like images of her and I see like expression and emotion, and like I feel like I'm so much more connected to her and understanding of who she was as a person, whereas before it just felt like I was looking at just a woman. Now I feel like I'm looking at a part of my history, although I still actually feel waves of sadness, because throughout this experience I felt like I was going to meet her at the end of it, and that reminder that that isn't the case is quite difficult.
Because our main priorities at the time of Tina's murder was Daniel and all the legality around guardianship, trying to adopt him, we weren't in the right place to challenge enough. Now I feel like I've expressed what I feel we could have done at the time and maybe should have done at the time. I'd processed it and put it in a box. And then when that box was opened, it's taken me back 32 years to where I was, so I've had to go through that grieving process again. It's been tough finding out things along the way for me, things that I didn't know or I knew in a different way. But I'm glad I did it.
Tina, Daniel, his nan and his aunts deserve to know what happened. And if the evidence is there, it should be found, and the person who committed that murder should be brought before the courts.
She's always going to be with me, but she's going to be with me in such a different way now. I wanted to be a voice for my mum. I wanted her voice to be heard, and I didn't want her to be forgotten. Because she's been forgotten for too long.
Yeah. You think you've achieved that?
I'd like to think I've achieved it. I would love justice for my mum, especially now I know that's an option. But I'm also realistic, and the best way to honour my mum and my nan would be to live my life and be happy and allow myself to be happy and not be stuck in the past. I don't think Nan protected me for so long for me to undo all of her hard work as well.